Hello, this is Jack Clock. It's been a while since I posted a video. I've been so busy with my job and with the new Zorro story that I've been working on, so I haven't really had the chance to post any new videos or any new content on YouTube. But I promise I haven't forgotten about this channel. And honestly, with such a special occasion like what's happened today, I need to make a new video about it. So I'm going to be talking about the new Zorro show. Well, I'm going to be having some footage in the background for you to watch while you listen to me share my thoughts and opinions on the show. I just finished seeing it today, so the opinions are still very fresh in my mind. The events of the story are still pretty fresh, and I'm just so giddy to talk about it. I think I want to start things off by just talking about, if you're going in expecting the average Zorro show or like average Zorro story, you're probably not going to be very happy with it. It is definitely one of the most unique versions of the character we've ever had on screen. Don't get me wrong, we've had versions of Zorro that are really unique and stuff like that. Obviously, we've had the Disney Zorro back in the 50s, which was a huge departure from a lot of the Golden Age Zorro stuff. And of course, then we have Mask of Zorro, which is basically the story of a legacy character adopting the mantle and stuff like that. We have all these different stories and all these different things, but none of them feel as unique as this show, as the Secuoya Studios Zorro show. It has its own vibrant DNA to it that feels completely different to every other version of the character. But like at the same time, it has this like swashbuckling vibe to it that the other Zorros have, and it doesn't feel like, despite it being marketed as a modern take on the character, it never feels like it's too modern, if that makes any sense at all. Like, it never feels like it loses that classic pulp swashbuckling vibe that the character has. It's the same characters actually, but with this completely different new coat of paint that makes it like so different on the outside, but like it has the same core messages and themes and ideas. And I think it's really special. Like, people are always telling me that like a modern day story about Zorro wouldn't work, that Zorro's supposed to be like a character that's in stories from the past and stuff like that, and I never agreed. Zorro's timeless. You just have to update the character with the times while still keeping the core features, and that's what I feel like this show did. I feel like it did that perfectly. And I think like a lot of just like one of the big things I really love about it, like, is the characters, especially like the already existing characters: Diego de la Vega, Bernardo, Monasterio, and Lolita. A lot of them are handled so well. Like, you can see the DNA and the ideas and stuff like that of where they came from. That they are the latest part of a lineage of different characters played by different people, but it has their own identity to it. I watched the whole time, and I never thought to myself, wow, this version of Monasterio is the exact same as Brett Lomond, or this version of Lolita is the exact same as the one in the silent film or the Tyrone Power film. Every character feels so different, and yet it's the same recognizable skeleton of the character. And I love that so much. It just feels right. And the characters themselves, even if they were completely new, unique characters, which I'm happy they're not, they feel so fleshed out. Their personalities feel so... I'm going to make a full video discussing a lot of their character traits and stuff like that. But, like, I don't know, from the basics, like, Diego has this really interesting arc. It's kind of an inverse of the character arc for Alejandro Murrieta, Antonio Banderas' character in The Mask of Zorro. He starts off with this obsession with, like, finding his father's killer. But, like, quickly he leaves that mindset because he realizes that in the show, the tradition of Zorro is a Native American tradition that their spirits pass down. And So Diego's given this opportunity to do such, like, just so much good to help people out, and despite him desperately wanting to avenge his father, who he dearly loves, he is completely willing to put that aside just to help people out. In fact, the plot of him the plot of him finding his father's killers is secondary to the plot of him fighting the various different groups that are vying for control of California and oppressing the people, which I love so much. In Mask of Zorro, sure, like, Alejandro eventually does move to care about the people, and Diego even does a bit of the same, but, like, we never have a story, because, like, it feels like a response to The Mask of Zorro. The Mask of Zorro is a revenge story through and through. It is a story about taking badass revenge on the people who wronged you and stuff like that. But this show, it is such a spiritual show in the talking about how vengeance and, like, murder and all of the, like, two wrongs don't make a right, about how doing all of those things will corrupt your soul. And it's really meaningful in seeing Diego rise above his vengeful quest, his anger, his wrath, and just being there for the people who need it. Especially recurring characters like Mei Ling and other characters like that, who suffer horribly, but he manages to give them a new life. He managed to give them the ability to rebuild their own lives, and I love that so much. And speaking of the pre-existing original characters, Bernardo, oh my god, I was worried that Bernardo was just going to be a comedy relief character from a lot of the trailers and stuff. We didn't get to see a lot of him, so I just kind of assumed he was just a background character and he was just going to be, look at him, he's funny and mute. But the show really surprised me a lot. He has a lot of nuance that is never outright said. His character's still mute, but the character, I'm trying to remember his name. Paco. I know his first name is Paco, but the actor, from what I've heard, he's a very skilled, like, comedy actor and theater actor and stuff like that. And you can really tell based on a lot of his mannerisms and stuff like that. And he's able to communicate so much with so little. Like, even in, like, Gene Sheldon's portrayal in the Disney Zorro, like, you still needed Diego to interpret for him to understand what he's talking about. But with this version of Bernardo in the Secuoya Studios Zorro, you understand him a lot. And you can tell he's the guy that carries a lot of, like, emotion with him and stuff like that. And someone who deeply cares a lot about Diego, kind of similarly to how, like, I don't know, Alfred cares about a lot of versions of Batman. It's kind of similar to that. And I really like that about him. And I'm happy that he got to do a lot. And also the recurring joke about him being Bagman was really funny. Just the Bagman, when he puts the bag on his head. God, there's a couple more legacy characters. One of them is Lolita Marquez. She's interesting. At first, I didn't really... Not that I disliked her character, I just wasn't that interested at first, but I think the more I got to learn about her, and the more... At first, I didn't really like... I didn't dislike her, but a lot of her character at first seemed to boil down to rebellious teenage youth. Or, not teenage, they're all adults at this point, but rebellious youth. But when she got more interaction with Diego, more interaction with Monasterio, which I'll get to him later, and interaction with her parents, she's not just this, like, fiery, rebellious woman, but, like, she's also, like, a very three-dimensional character. She struggles a lot with communicating with people, but she has a good heart at the end of the day. And while she's not afraid to kick ass and do stuff on her own, she's also not afraid to ask people for help and try and mend relationships and, you know, friendships and stuff like that. And also her relationship with Monasterio is just adorable. I never thought I was going to say that. If you told 12-year-old me that Monasterio in a romance with someone would be, like, sweet and adorable, I wouldn't have believed you. Because Monasterio in the show, he's nothing like Brett Loman's portrayal in the 50s. All of the hatred and malice and evil of that character in 1957 is gone from this version. He's basically Monasterio in name only. But I love that. It's like if you took the character of Brett Loman's Monasterio and you put him in a mirror. It's like his personality traits are the complete opposite. And it's so interesting. We've seen so many different Zorro captains and, you know, commandantes and alcaldes, you know, where there's these conniving, evil, greedy, murderous people. But you see this guy, and he's just this really tired, struggling, basically office worker, just trying to keep the peace. But his boss, you know, the evil, the governor, is just a monster. And he's constantly just wrestling with him, just like to do what is right, but his job is just so rough because of his horrible boss, basically. And it's just really interesting. It's interesting to see someone in a position of authority like that in a Zorro story who isn't evil or is immediately replaced or killed by someone who is. I really like that, and I really like how they never have, like, the love triangle between him, Diego, and Lolita is never, like, annoying. It never gets in the way. Like, sure, Diego pines for Lolita a lot, but the fact that he is happy, that she's happy with Monasterio, is just really sweet, and the two develop a really good friendship throughout the show. And, alright, the new characters as well. I'm going to try and keep a lot of this first part spoiler-free, but my favorite character in the entire show is Nalin. She's a Native American warrior, essentially, who believes that she should be the next Zorro. The spirit should have chosen her instead of Diego. And she spends the rest of the series harassing the hell out of him for it. And it's really funny, because she's basically the main antagonist of the show. And I don't mean villain. She's not evil or anything, but she's the main antagonist of the show. Not the governor or Monasterio or anything. A lot of the show is basically Zorro versus Zorro. And it's so interesting. Like, I don't want to get into it too much. I want to save it for the full video, especially since I think her character has a lot to analyze. But she's essentially, if you made a Zorro movie or show and made it like the dark, gritty Zorro reboot, she's the character that Zorro would be. But you see her fighting against the Zorro who is selfless, kind, sweet, funny. And both of them have their points. Both of them have good, you know, ideals and, you know, wish to help people. But both of them also have their own flaws, their own miscommunications and wrong ideals, and it leads them to clash a lot. Zorro winds up fighting her and her band of native renegades more than the evil alcalde soldiers, which is super interesting. That's one of the most unique things about the show, and it adds so much flavor to the show that would not have been there if it was just Zorro versus the soldiers. And there's multiple other characters that are really great too. A lot of characters who don't get as much screen time. I think Lolita's parents are really interesting, but I feel like they were kind of on the weaker side. I couldn't really tell what was going on with them a lot of the time, and I get that's kind of intentional, but I don't know. They were fun. They were fun, though. Their actors were really good. And the Russian characters, they were nice. They were interesting. They had their own fun moments, especially the advisor lady. She was really smart and conniving in a way that not a lot of that reminded me a lot of the 1940 film that not a lot of other Zorro stories tend to do. Like, she definitely reminded me of Luis Quintero's wife Inez Quintero. She reminded me a lot of her, but like Russian, which I thought was really interesting. And there's a few other characters as well. I think I have a soft spot for Nightcrow. He seems pretty cool. He's like a mentor figure for Diego, but he's very hands off. He's like constantly driving Diego to make his own discoveries and decisions. He is almost never hands on, and I really like that. He leads Diego to make his own choices as Zorro, the right choices. And it's really interesting. But I don't know, enough about the characters. A lot of the main plot is really interesting too. It has, without spoiling anything, it has a lot of the investigation and intrigue of the Disney Zorro, which I really like. I know Zorro's brand is more swashbuckler and less world's greatest detective, but I always like the fact that Zorro is able to solve a good mystery when it's thrown at him. And him piecing together the suspects of who killed his father in the beginning. And no, that's not a spoiler. That's the premise of the show. Diego's father, Alejandro, is murdered by some mysterious group. And just seeing the different suspects being narrowed down, seeing Diego come up with clues and finding out who is doing it, and who is causing all of these plots and stuff like that. It's really fun. It's really intriguing, and you're constantly second guessing yourself as you watch more and more of the story. And it's just really neat. I feel like it would have been lesser if they just did swashbuckling stuff, because they do a lot of swashbuckling. A lot of Zorro appearances, actually. I feel like Zorro appears more in these episodes than he does in the average episode of Disney or New World Zorro. But there's also a lot of investigating and Diego poking around and asking questions and stuff like that, which is really fun. It's really interesting. You get to see the Don Diego aspect of Zorro used a lot more than just throwing people off of his trail. And oh god, a lot of them. Another highlight, the swashbuckling. Oh my god. The swashbuckling in the Secuoya Studios Zorro is phenomenal. Now, you know me, I'm a sucker for a lot of the sword fights in Zorro. But a lot of them are more difficult for modern audiences to swallow, mainly because of the camera and the stunt work. It's not very contemporary. And while I'm fine with that, I too sometimes notice, like, hey, sometimes these fights can be a little dated. And while they have a lot of charm to them, this show is unironically just one of the best in terms of giving a good fight scene that holds up to modern day filmmaking, which is really impressive for a show that, while it has a pretty decent budget, is still like a TV show made by an upstart company. So the fact that they were able to do all of what they did with the resources they had is just mind-blowing. Like, there is a particular fight scene in episode 3, I'm not going to spoil anything about it, but my jaw was dropped the whole time. Just seeing the choreography, the fighting, the intensity of it all. It reminded me less of a classic Zorro story and more of the Netflix Daredevil show or the Batman. And I mean that in the best way possible. It has that, I wouldn't say gritty, but it's something similar to that. It has that intensity to it that just feels right, but still feels like Zorro. It's a Zorro you've never seen before, but it's Zorro nonetheless. And when you get to, because Zorro does a lot of fighting in this one, he does a lot of sword fighting, yeah, he also does a lot of bare knuckle boxing, he does a lot of cool whip tricks that, honestly, I've never seen before in a Zorro story. He does a thing that I love, he does throwing knives. I love that so much. Sure, we've seen him sometimes toss a pocket knife or something to just stun someone or throw someone off, but no, this dude is using them like batarangs, sort of, and he's like throwing them into people's shoulders, and he's like using them as ranged weapons and stuff when even his whip won't cut it. It's so cool, and it gives him this really unique identity in his fighting the other Zorros don't have. And I really like that a lot. It feels right. And even, like, some of the fights, Diego's not in them. Sometimes it's fights between different characters who aren't him. And those are super interesting, too. Because in those ones, you can never tell who's going to win. Because it's characters that don't have, who aren't the flagship character of the show. So, none of them outside of Diego had plot armor. So, you could never tell. Are both of them going to make it out alive? Or is one of them going to die? What's going to happen? And even Diego loses some of the fights. I won't say which ones, obviously, to avoid spoilers, but he doesn't win every single fight in this one, which is just mind-blowing. He sometimes gets his ass kicked, sometimes really hard. He's been on death's door multiple times in the show. And that's another thing that really feels contemporary about it. You see a lot of stories, with superheroes and stuff like that, where the character is destroyed within an inch of their life by a villain or an antagonist. And Zorro doesn't usually do that. Sure, there's sometimes where he has, and sometimes I've been on the edge of my seat seeing Zorro go through a near-death experience. But not like this. You're constantly like, oh, how is Zorro going to beat this guy? But like, is Zorro going to beat this guy? Is Zorro going to win this one? And if he loses, what are the consequences of it? Which is perfect. And even when he's not around, and it's characters who aren't him that are fighting each other, I'm never thinking to myself, oh, when's Zorro going to show up? Because not only is there basically more than one Zorro, even though there technically isn't, there's a lot of characters fighting each other who you want to see make it out alive, or if you want them to lose, you would at least want them to lose with dignity, which is really interesting. It's like every character has just a really unique motivation to why they fight. Every character has you kind of rooting for them in some way, with few exceptions. Because you understand a lot of the motivations of a lot of the characters when they're fighting, when they're scheming, stuff like that. And a lot of them you grow to root for, even if they're opposing Zorro himself. Which is just such an impressive work by the writers, especially since it's so unprecedented. Usually, in a Zorro story, there's the good guys, there's the bad guys. Sometimes you get stories like in the comics that have people who are in between, but usually they don't stay that way for too long. They either have to be good or have to be bad. But this is so much different. Sure, there is, actual evil bastards out there, like the governor, but when you get a character like Monasterio in that one, who is nowhere near as evil as his Disney counterpart, or his Zorro the Chronicles counterpart, or his comic counterparts, and is a guy genuinely trying to do good, but is basically forced by evil oppressors to work for them, that is something you rarely, if ever, see in Zorro at all. And I just love the complexity of the stories. Like, it's complexity you rarely ever see in Zorro. It's constantly making you question, is Diego doing the right thing in this scenario? Is Na Lin going to do the right thing in this scenario or the wrong thing? What is Monasterio going to do to try and do what is right despite the fact he's being forced to do wrong? It's just really interesting because outside of the few really evil characters, it never feels like it's morally condemning a lot of the characters as people. Sure, it condemns some of their actions, especially Na Lin, who constantly makes the wrong choices. But at the end of the day, it also asks you to sympathize with them a lot. Because these are characters who are basically thrust into a situation a lot of them never asked for. And a lot of unprecedented territory for many of them. And you really grow to pity them at worst, and at best kind of root for a happy ending for them. Oh god, it's really interesting, and I can't wait to talk more about it in maybe a more in-depth video, but this is just my first impressions. And oh god, another thing I really like, the costumes. Now, my mom's a huge sucker for historical costumes, and she was kind of pointing out some of the inaccuracies and stuff like that. And while, yeah, if you're looking for historical authenticity and accurate, or not authentic, if you're looking for historical accuracy in a lot of the costumes and set design and stuff like that in general, you're going to be a little disappointed. Zorro in general has always been kind of a fairy tale kind of thing. It's never really been historical reality. But if you're looking for something authentic, this definitely feels like old Mexican California in the 1830s. It just has that vibe to it, especially in the costumes. A lot of them, even if they aren't something people would wear, it looks like something someone would wear. And it just feels really special. It never feels like a costume half the time. Even the Zorro costume within itself, it's honestly, I want to talk about it so bad. It is one of the best Zorro costumes ever made. And I do not say that lightly. I've talked about it before. Some of my favorite Zorro costumes are the Tyrone Power outfit and the Django / Zorro outfit, as I've mentioned before in my podcast. But this, honestly, might be in my top 3. It might even dethrone the Django / Zorro outfit for me. It's that good. The details on it are just so good. And the thing about it is there's more than one, too. Because both Diego and Naldan wear different Zorro outfits. And both of them are so iconic. And both of them are so good. I mean, I have such a hard time picking and choosing which, one is my favorite. Because both of them are just so bold and so unique. And so, when I say simplistic, I mean in a really good way. But, it's when you can look at it, you can tell from a first glance, oh, this is a Zorro outfit. And if you look at it from a second glance, oh, this is Miguel Bernadette's outfit. This is Dalia Giocoatl's outfit. But, these outfits are so, in a good way, I mean in a really good way, simple, plain. These aren't the heavily decorated outfits of Antonio Banderas, and I'm really happy that they went in the complete opposite direction as him. It is basically a tactical outfit. Everything is designed to be aerodynamic. Everything is designed to be practical. Even the mask itself is a solid, bold leather mask that could reasonably protect you from being punched in the face. And I'm pretty sure actually once or twice it does. And, oh god, it looks cool too. It looks so cool. If you told me that we were going to get a new Zorro with a leather mask and it didn't look really dumb and it looked really cool, I would have struggled to figure out what that would have looked like. Let alone 2 costumes with leather masks like that. And it just looks so badass. The whole outfit, if you see it in pictures, it looks cool enough, but it does not sell you on how cool these outfits are until you see them in motion, until you see the actors running around in them and fighting people. When you see Miguel Bernadette in that really cool, almost trench coat kind of design, running around and fighting people. When you see Dalia Giocoatl in that blackened leather, kind of protective, almost armor-like outfit, running around fighting people with tomahawks. And the same thing for her predecessor. I don't know his actor, but he was so cool too in what little we got to see him. And oh god, it is just such a cool design for such cool characters too. The whole thing just screams cool, and I think modern audiences are really gonna dig this version of the character, not just their personalities, but when I say Zorro is badass, I can tell sometimes people are like, huh? They usually think he's a more comedic character, or more for children, or more, I mean he is child friendly, but he's for all audiences. He's cool for all audiences. And this one, well, definitely, I wouldn't say this one's for kids. This is more for preteens and up. It is definitely just, it goes to show the fun, swashbuckler, pulpy, adventure side of Zorro. But at the same time, he is cool. He's awesome. And there's very little, if any, cheese in the show at all. So if you're looking for a Zorro to show to people that is 100% played straight with no cheese or anything like that, this is the version. And while there's humor and comedy and stuff like that, it's never ridiculous. It's always kind of laid back comedy. The jokes feel natural. It never feels comic booky or pulpy or anything like that. And while I love a lot of the comic booky, pulpy humor of Zorro, I mean, this is my favorite Zorro movie after all. This show is definitely for people who aren't sold on that. This is a show that Zorro fans can enjoy as a show, like, to see their favorite character again after God knows how many years for a lot of people. For me, it's 12. But this is also for new people to get into the legend. It's for new people to check out and to be enthralled by the stories that a lot of us fans grew up in our youth or as adults. And it gives them a window into the franchise that I don't think would have been there before. Even The Mask of Zorro, while I think it's timeless, some people have definitely said it's shown its age sometimes. But this show is modern and timeless at the same time. And I feel like it's a show that's definitely for everyone. Except for the whole, the new story is woke crowd. They're gonna hate it, but who cares about them anyways? But ultimately, those are my basic opinions on the new Secuoya Studios Zorro show. I won't say anything about the ending, but it leaves up for season 2, which I hope they do. And I will be eagerly awaiting it, and I'll definitely be rewatching the show more than once. Anyways, this is Jack Clock. It's a wonder to talk to you guys again. I promise I'm going to be posting more videos, more content on YouTube, especially since I'm nearing 1,000 subscribers. I'm going to be posting more podcast content. I'm going to be posting some Zorro video essays, which I'm looking forward to, maybe some non-Zorro content. And it's just good seeing you guys again, especially on, such a wonderful, special day. And I hope all of you have as much fun seeing the new Zorro as I am. Peace.